Tahiti is in sight, and despite its international airport, it is, of all the South Pacific destinations, the most evocative. The coral reef surrounding the islands is impressive, and somewhat daunting if the surf is up. But once inside, the perfect anchorage is one of the reasons why the island was so popular, with great navigators like Cook, Bligh and Bougainville. In yesteryear, the women of this island swam out to the ships when they arrived in this anchorage, followed by their menfolk in canoes. The sailors were then entertained with song, dance and ceremony, like this one, that takes place just outside Papeete in the first 2 weeks of July. The Heiva is celebrated in Tahiti and Bora Bora. This particular ceremony, the crowning of the king's son, takes place annually and is not primarily intended as a tourist attraction. It's performed for the local Polynesian people as a celebration of their culture. The participants are all Polynesian, and the music, dance, costumes and ritual are as close to the ancient forms as Polynesian historians have been able to research. The warrior costumes and dances are pretty impressive. This man, playing the king, is in fact the inheritor of this title in reality. The dancers performing here are professionals, but the ferocity of the dance must have been intimidating to Cook or Bligh when they were entertained to dinner. I suspect they wondered who was going to be next on the menu. These ladies are the descendants of the reason that Fletcher Christian and his men got into so much trouble and ended up on Pitcairn Island. Papeete, town and harbour, lies below. What was once the anchorage for Cook and Bligh and all the others is now an industrial port, with merchant ships bringing western goods for distribution to all the French islands. Tourist ships tie onto the quay in the centre of town, where the roads are as busy here as in metropolitan France. So strange in the middle of the South Pacific to find this modern, intensely busy town. The airport is a hive of activity serving the nearby islands as well as the tourist industry. Papeete market is a real pleasure, and in stark contrast with the tiny shops in the Marquesa and Tuamotu islands that we've just left, it is a real-life, busy, bustling, every-morning market, with even a local band playing in the market cafe. Outside, the Heiva celebration continues, with a procession celebrating the activities of the entire French Society Islands group. With Tahiti in the lead, every island has sent its own beauty queen and escort, as well as representatives of important social groups to Papeete for this special fortnight. The Asian national flag is far more popular than the tricolour of France. There is, of course, considerable French influence, and a lot of support money pours into the islands. But the Polynesian peoples are demanding their independence and autonomy. They're very proud of their race and heritage and cannot wait for the French to leave. Certainly the magnificence of the islands and the quantity of beauty queens that would put any Miss World to shame should ensure that visiting the Society Islands will be a major event in any sailor's voyage. It seems every islander and island has something to offer. In fact, it took over 4 hours for the procession to pass the reviewing stand. It was mainly French people and tourists in the audience. This procession is not always politically correct, but it's a lot of fun. It may not be Bastille Day yet. That coincides with the end of the Polynesian Heiva on the 14th of July. But the French and Polynesian people of Tahiti certainly know how to party and celebrate. The fireworks are as good as anywhere in the world. When darkness falls, people leave their houses for the town quayside and the night cafes. There are dozens of independent kitchens set up with a range of food to delight any palate, whilst enjoying the entertainment of the young hopefuls participating in the talent competition. This is a wonderful way for yachtists to meet local people, as you frequently end up sitting at a table or a bar with total strangers eating well and far into the night. The climate is perfect, and just across the straits, called the Sea of Moons, lies the island of Moorea. The steady breeze blows us away from Tahiti towards Moorea, whose main anchorage bears the name Cook's Bay. The cruise ship also anchors here inside the reef, but they've had to stay at the head of the bay because of their draft. The area is very residential, with excellent roads and neatly kept parks. The University of Berkeley, USA, has a research station here, and one can only feel sorry for the students having to work so far from home. The campus is simple, but with all mod cons in best American style. The main town of Pau is a short walk from the anchorage, and on a Saturday morning it's the local meeting place for young and old alike. At first I was not quite sure why so many lads were carrying chickens. I assumed there was going to be another beauty competition. My assumptions were put in doubt when a hardboard ring was swiftly erected and a crowd formed around it. I'd stumbled on the local cockfighting syndicate. Happily, the small boys were somewhat fiercer than the cocks, and it all ended up amusingly with the chickens running away from each other. To the delight and amusement of the crowd, it appears this is not unusual. Cockfighting is a real and present historic occupation of the peoples of the Society Islands. The next two boys prepare their pets in the ring. Whatever one feels about blood sports, cockfighting exists throughout all of the Caribbean, Pacific, Asia, and is still legal in Louisiana in the United States. In every island of the South Pacific one sees fighting cocks outside the homes of islanders. Here the birds fight without artificial spurs. Equally politically incorrect are youngsters climbing the bamboo pole set up for the purpose. There's no safety net or rubber mat should they fall, and all the children are allowed to climb the pole if they want. Fortune seems to favour the brave, and the unskilled do not get very high. Tradition states that cockfighting, fati tuo amur, literally causing fighting amongst fowls, has existed ever since the Polynesians came to these islands 3,000 years ago. Of course, many youngsters prefer to pay money to ride the funfair rather than participate in the ancient activities. Long before the first foreign vessel came to these shores, the Tahitians were traditionally training and fighting their birds. Rue Fa-Toa is the god of cockfighting and appears among the earliest minor divinities. The Tahitians by tradition do not bet or wager money on the contests. They've raised and trained them for the gratification of watching them beat each other up. Possibly a bit like boxing. Once one cock gives up, runs away or submits, the fight is stopped and the birds are parted and handed back to their owners. He who fights and runs away? Anyway. When the local gendarmes arrive, the portable ring disappears in a trice. The word brave is proudly written in the sand by the young owner, whilst the victor of the fight looks distinctly tired and battered. The French police do not appear to be particularly welcome. though they try to be friendly and possibly just not see what is really going on. Heading west again, we stop at the reef-fringed island of Bora Bora. The well-marked entrance between the reefs was helpful. The Americans used Bora Bora as a major airbase during World War II. Michener was a young naval officer here and modelled his Bali High on this island. There are some quiet and pleasant anchorages, but the island is dedicated to tourism. Daily the cruise liners deposit thousands of passengers to sample the delights. Having cleared customs, we set sail for the Cook Islands, for Suvorov, so named after a Russian merchant ship that discovered it in 1814. The entrance to the lagoon is difficult and challenging. There's no buoyage, and because Suvorov is an atoll, an island on a reef that fringes a lagoon, it's hard to locate the pass, which is lumpy and quite narrow. A reliable engine is essential, together with eyeball navigation and pilotage. Once inside, it's very different. The water's calm and translucent. The island of Suvorov is my idea of the most beautiful island in the world. Take but nothing, leave but footprints. It's now only inhabited by a couple of Cook Island Park rangers who welcome visiting yachts. This was Tom Neal's perfect island. He lived here alone for many years and wrote a book called An Island to Oneself. He also spent a long time looking for the buried treasure but failed to find it. Or is the island itself the treasure? There are only ever a few yachts anchored in the lagoon, and it is the most delightful meeting place that you can imagine. Of all the places I've sailed to, this is truly the perfect desert island. What dreams are made of. Bambola lies at anchor in this paradise, but around her hull swim some seriously large sharks. They look ferocious, and as we discover, if you throw scraps of waste food overboard after meals, they scavenge around the yacht all day long. All shapes and sizes, the lagoon is full of sharks. But none of us had a problem with them. We swam every day. The shallow waters also hold some threat to the unwary. None of them aggressive, unless you don't see them and step on them. This stonefish has a particularly venomous spike on its back, and the sea snake will finish you off if it manages to get hold of you. Mind you, it has a very small mouth. The stonefish with its pretty fins is a much bigger danger. The spike in its back will penetrate sandals, and you simply can't see it when they're motionless. You don't have to be an ornithologist to be impressed by the bird life. Amazing variations in one spot. These boobies just sat in their bush demanding food from any passing bird or person. The noise from the rest of the colony was not just because of my presence. It seemed to go on all day. I suppose if you just lay your eggs in between some stones, it's hard to know which one is yours. You land and start looking for an egg, or is that too simplistic? Young goslings are very attractive, making it hard to leave this enchanted island. We headed out west-southwest, bound for Tonga. As always on passage, the fishing lines were out, 2 off the stern rail and a rod. Fishing from a sailing boat rolling in the ocean swell is quite an exercise, even on calm days. This magnificent mahi-mahi is only one of many that we caught. My crew, Alice and Manu, managed to supply us with fresh-caught fish almost daily in the South Pacific. To land a medium-sized mahi-mahi takes 2 of us, with the risk of going overboard ever present. It's a golden rule in Bambola that we only fish when we need to eat and never for sport. Very strange bullheads. They really are the most beautiful golden fish, with magnificent upper dorsal fin in rainbow colours. They swim in married pairs, and frequently, if we caught one, Then another of the opposite sex would follow on to a line a few minutes later, before we had the chance to pull the other lines in. My crew Manu is a wonderful chef, and the beautiful mahi-mahi provided delicious meals for us all for the rest of the passage to Tonga. The island of Vavau is one of the 170 that make up this kingdom. Only 36 are inhabited. Vavau is the tourist capital of the group, with bareboat charter yachts, waterside bars and restaurants supplying locally brewed ice-cold beer. Visited by Tasman in 1643 and by Captain Cook in the mid-1700s. Cook gave the king a Galapagos giant tortoise that lived in the palace gardens until it died in 1964, aged over 200. This is a very sophisticated kingdom with a high literacy rate, free schooling and a good social medical system, as well as its own airlines and beers, and a very successful national banking system. Christianity is important because it requires them to do absolutely nothing on Sundays except go to church. As in all Polynesian islands, pigs and chickens wander around being free-range pigs and chickens, and doing the things that chickens and pigs do. The result can be charming, and I'm certain that many of these baby Miss Piggies are household pets and not a source of food. With an all-year temperature of between 75 and 80 degrees, the housing is surprisingly substantial and smart, with all mod cons. Because of the presence of charter yachts, the waterside restaurants provide a very pleasant menu for the crews of blue water yachts to have a night out for a change.
They were actually harmless, but they frightened me.
There is no shortage of secure anchorages in the islands around Vavau. Many boats from New Zealand make an annual pilgrimage to spend the winter in these charming waters. Although tourism is the main industry of the islands, visitors never swamp them, and unusually there are all the facilities for a wonderful holiday without being overrun by other tourists. The slow, demanding lifestyle of the local Polynesians continues, much the same pace as before. The Tongans call it nofo fifia, or living happily, or mui nonga, a peaceful life. The 70-mile sail to Tonga Tapu, the capital of the islands, is quite lumpy and requires care and attention because of the reefs and islets. We're glad to arrive inside the fishing harbour by Queen Salotte's Wharf. We moor stern to the quay, Mediterranean style, on our own anchor. The fishing fleet is active, and the King's personal canoe is moored nearby. It's about 3 miles from the port to the town, and the busy sophistication of the island quickly becomes apparent. More than 2/3 of Tonga's population live here in the capital, Nuku'alofa. I'm going to the depot to get the Here-Full bus to the village of Kolove to see the pika, the famous flying foxes in their protected sanctuary. Well, I see the odd bird flying about. It is a bird, isn't it? Then, looking up at the trees more carefully, I can see shapes about the size of large cats hanging there. Yep, that's it. Flying foxes. Wonderful, strange, odd creatures. They can have a wingspan of more than 1 metre across, and these fellows must be approaching that. They certainly look like foxes as well, except for the odd hooks in their elbows. Apparently there are between 3,000 and 4,000 of these bats in the islands. It's not a bird at all. The royal ensign flies above a very small palace for a very large king. A very large royal church opposite a very impressive cemetery for the kings and queens of the Kingdom of Tonga, the last remaining Polynesian monarchy in the world. This impressive modern centenary church nearby is in stark contrast to the public cemetery just down the road. Absolutely wonderful. The cloths hanging over the graves are local materials joined together to produce these colourful tributes to loved ones that have passed away. Very Catholic religious paintings on cloths and some modern designs. Sailing west again towards Fiji. For the very first time we see an albatross. This is the famous bird of sailors' tales. It stays with us for nearly half an hour, circling Bambola, gliding effortlessly on its long, graceful wings. The somewhat tricky passage to Suva in Fiji involves dodging between islands you're not allowed to land on without permits. The Fijians want to preserve their original way of life in some islands by stopping visitors. Suva, the capital of Fiji. In comparison with Tonga, Fiji is huge. The harbour of Suva, the biggest in the South Pacific. Most boats tend to anchor off the Suva Yacht Club, who welcome visiting blue water cruisers. It's a real delight to see the modern kids practising in their optimists, and the Yacht Club facilities and the gardens are modern and excellent, without totally losing the South Pacific flavour. This is the first yacht club since Colon on the Panama Canal that we found, and it's very popular with the younger cruisers. Inside the clubhouse, it's easy to relax with a cold beer and a chat to the locals. Suva is a modern, multiracial city of some 190,000 people. A lot of Australians and New Zealanders come here to holiday and to live, as well as people from Asia. Skyscrapers, modern shopping malls, and major Australian banks dominate the city. Just opposite the tower block of the Royal Bank of Fiji, the Catholic Cathedral still looks impressive, situated right in the centre of town. The curiously vaulted ceiling is interestingly different. The stained glass windows, just as lovely as any in Europe. A surprise is the air-conditioned 6-screen cinema built by the Australians. In contrast to all this, the municipal market of Suva City is much as it's been for hundreds of years, with the possible exception of the blue plastic sheeting erected to keep the sun off the vendors and their produce. Quite amazing to walk beneath it as it flaps in the midday breeze. Outside, the local farm produce is available from the little groups of women sitting on the ground, whilst inside the building, more established vendors have stalls overflowing with fruit and vegetables, pineapple and guava juice. For yachties, it's a real Aladdin's cave of delicious foods after so much fish. Tucked behind the pile of melons are the stairs with the sign grog sales. That's slightly misleading for Europeans. In fact, the entire first floor is taken up with the sale of produce to make kava. Kava is drunk in Tonga and Fiji, and I've enjoyed sampling it. There's a social sharing aspect to the little ceremony of drinking it, although it does leave your lips numb and your tongue tingling slightly. Almost as good as sailing. In the next episode, we sail to Australia and Port Jackson to see Sydney Harbour Bridge.